This is video number 3 for Access Module 3 in the Shelley Cashman textbook on Microsoft Office 365. We're at the top of page 3-26. We're going to do an update query. An update query is a query that will update many records at one time. If you have to make the same change to a whole bunch of records in a database table, doing that one at a time can be pretty tedious and time-consuming. On the other hand, if you know how to use an update query, you can update a whole bunch of records at once just with a single update query command. So that's what we're going to do. Number 1 says create a new query for the veterinary vendors table. Click on the vendors table. Choose query design. Double click on veterinary vendors. Let's stretch it out here to make it a little bit taller so we can see all the fields. We've got some choices up here. We've been using a select query in all of our examples so far. Now we're going to try an update query. Click on update. It wants us to specify which field we want to update. The field we want to update is the product type. Click on product type. The table is already specified, veterinary vendors, and we can update it to a specific value. So we're going to update it to VAC. There is no criteria, which means it's going to apply to every single record in the entire table. I think this only has 5 records in it, so it's just going to change all 5. But it will change every single one of them to VAC. Now, before we do this, let's just take a look at veterinary vendors. Let's just double click on it here. And we've got product type. This was not filled in at all before. So apparently the assumption we're making here is this is going to be the predominant product type. And rather than type it in over and over and over again, we're just going to run one query, which will set all of them to VAC. If we need to go in and make changes in a small number of records, we can easily do that. Let's go ahead and close it. So now that we know what's in our vendors table, we can just go ahead and close that. And we'll come back after we make the update and see if VAC got inserted in all these fields. So let's go ahead and close the vendors table. This is our complete query. It's going to be a very simple query. By the way, let's go to our View button up here. Click on View. We haven't looked at SQL View. Click on SQL View. And you'll see what's happening is in the background, Access is actually creating this command for us. So the actual command is update the table veterinary vendors, set the product type field in the veterinary vendors table to the value VAC. So this is the actual query that we're creating, but Access makes it easy for us to do that by just filling in the blanks down here in Design View. So now we're good to go. Let's go ahead and run that. Click on the red exclamation mark to run the query. It tells us how many rows we're going to update, and it also tells us we can't undo this. This is different from using Word or Excel. So click on Yes. Now let's go back and look at our veterinary vendors table. And sure enough, VAC was put in the product type field of every single row in that table. Okay, now that we've verified the changes, we can close the table. He tells us we don't need to save this query, so just close the query. No, we don't want to save the changes. Next thing we're going to do is take a look at validation rules. Validation rules give you the ability to validate automatically the values that are typed in when somebody is creating a table in Access. So you may have a limited range of values that you want to go in a particular field. For example, you may not want to allow negative numbers to appear in a field. So you can create a validation rule that says that everything that gets typed into that field has to be greater than or equal to 0. So let's go to page 3-29. We're going to open up the vendors table again. So right click on it, choose Design View. Click on Zip Code. Let's go down here to field size. Right now it's 255. So just backspace over the 255, replace it with a number 20. Click out of there to save it. If the user tries to type in anything for a zip code that's more than 20 characters long, it will not be allowed to do so. Now we're going to specify a required field. Select the vendor name field. Down below we've got a required property that's set to no right now. We're going to change that to yes. If we double click on it, it'll change to yes. You can also go way over here to the right side and you can click on the down arrow and select yes as well. But for an option that only has yes and no, you can double click and it'll toggle back and forth between the yes and no values. Now we're going to specify a range. We're going to go to the top of page 3-30. We're going to select the quantity field. So go to the left side of it and select it. Click on the validation rule box down here. we're going to type in a rule. Our rule is going to be greater than 0 and less than or equal to 1,000. So if the user tries to type in anything that is 0 or less or over 1,000, an error message is going to be displayed, and the error message is whatever we put in the validation text field here. So we're going to put in must be greater than 0 and at most 1,000. So if the user tries to type in a value outside that range, it will not be accepted. They'll get an error message and they'll get a chance to try it again. Now we're going to specify a default value. That's at the bottom of page 3-30. Select the product type field. There's a property down here called default value. Click on default value, and we're going to put in equals VAC. So if the user is entering records and he gets to the product type field, VAC will automatically be there by default. If he wants to put something else in, he can easily type over it and tab out of the field when he's done. If he wants to accept it, he can just tab on to the next field and VAC will be the default. Let's go to the bottom of page 3-30. We want to specify a collection of legal values. Make sure product type is still selected. We're going to give a validation rule down here now, so click in the validation rule area, and we're going to type in equals VAC or equals MC or equals SUP. Tab out of that. Notice it puts the quotation marks in for you. We could have written them in ourselves, but if we don't, Access will put them in for us. Our validation text is going to be must be VAC, MC, or SUP. Okay, now we're down at the bottom of page 3-31. We're going to save the validation rules, default values, and formats. Click the Save button on the Quick Access toolbar to save our changes. So all of these changes have been made to the veterinary vendors table. Click on Save. And we've made some changes here. Since we changed that one field size from 255 down to 20, it's telling us that we might lose some data. We're not going to, but it wants to make sure that we know that that's a possibility. Go ahead and click on Yes. When the second warning comes up, click on Yes as well. Go ahead and click on Yes, and then we can close our vendors table. So I think we'll stop there, and we'll pick up with the next video on updating a table that contains validation rules at the bottom of page 3-32.